Hello and welcome to this presentation on how ECHA has started to contribute to safer drinking water by supporting the implementation of the revised Drinking Water Directive. My name is Panagiotis Zarogiannis and I'm a regulatory officer at ECHA's prioritization unit, from where I coordinate the project of ECHA's input to the setting up of the new substance approval system under the revised directive. So let's start with a high-level overview of the directive itself. The revised directive was adopted on the 16th of December last year and came into force on the 12th of January this year. The focus of ECHA's tasks is Article 11. Article 11 creates a new legal framework as it introduces minimum hygiene requirements for materials coming into contact with drinking water while supporting a uniform playing field and the better function of the internal market. Beyond the tasks assigned to ECHA, which this presentation will focus on, the revised directive brings about several other changes, including an update to pre-existing safety standards that takes into account the recommendations of the World Health Organization, the introduction of a risk-based approach across the whole of the supply chain, the obligation of access to water, with particular protection afforded to vulnerable and marginalized groups, and finally, improved transparency for consumers in relation to the efficiency and effectiveness of the operations of water suppliers across the Union. For now, however, let's turn our focus on Article 11. So, what is the scope of this new Article 11? Firstly, the article applies to materials in new installations, but also repair works or reconstruction in existing installations. Secondly, the requirements of the article extend from the abstraction to the treatment, the storage, and the distribution of drinking water all the way to the tap, but not beyond the tap. Article 11 aims to protect human health by preventing adverse effects on color, odor, taste, and microbial growth, and most importantly for ECHA, the leaching of contaminants into water at higher than necessary levels. All in all, Article 11 focuses on the health and hygiene aspects of contact materials for drinking water. Other aspects, such as product safety, for instance, is covered elsewhere, for example, under the construction products regulations. To achieve its aims, Article 11 creates a regulatory toolbox. Three pillars in this toolbox are of relevance and two involve ECHA directly. Firstly, European positive list of starting substances, compositions and constituents will be set up. And this is one of the tasks with ECHA's direct involvement. There will be four lists for organic, metallic, cementitious, enamel, ceramic and other inorganic materials. This list will contain the only substances, compositions, and constituents authorized for use in contact materials in accordance with Annex 5 of the directive. Secondly, ECHA will collaborate with the Joint Research Center in developing methodologies for testing and accepting starting substances, compositions, and constituents into the European positive lists. Finally, and without ECHA's direct involvement, there will be the development of procedures and methods for testing and accepting final materials. The European Commission will adopt a European standard for testing and assessing products and the introduction of the new EU label that will mark products that are in compliance with the directive. In relation to the timelines involved, a summary is provided in the table you can see on this slide. Starting from the entry into force of the directive in January, Member States were given 6 months to notify to ECHA their national positive list and other national provisions. This was indeed completed by the deadline of the 12th of July. Other deadlines relate to the adoption of several legal acts that Article 11 prescribes, of which 3 are of relevance to ECHA's work. By January 2024, the Commission aims to adopt, with ECHA's and JRC's support, the previously mentioned methodologies for testing and accepting starting substances, compositions, and constituents. This is prescribed under Article 11, paragraph 2.a, and will be an implementing act. Another implementing act is prescribed under Article 11, paragraph 2.b. This will bring into legal text the first European positive list with expiry dates per entry. The list should be adopted by January 2025. A third act, a delegated act, prescribed under Article 11, paragraph 5, will set out in legal text the new procedure for the submission and processing of applications and proposals submitted to ECHA. A deadline for this act has not been specified, but this will have to be achieved by January 2025 the latest, and most probably earlier. The earliest that an application or proposal can be submitted to ECHA will be January 2025. So we have now seen an overview of what Article 11 requires and the associated timelines. The next few slides will present some practical aspects of ECHA's ongoing work. ECHA has been assigned essentially three tasks. Task 1 is ECHA supporting the Commission in developing the first European positive list over the period January 21 to January 25. Concurrently with Task 1 and over the same period, January 21 to January 25, ECHA's second task will be to set up the procedures and systems which will be necessary for making the European positive list system work. And finally, after this preparatory work has been done, task 3 will be the actual maintenance of the European positive list through additions, renewals, updates, and removals of entries from January 2025 onwards. The first European positive list, which are currently developing, must be reviewed over a period of 15 years from their adoption. So this is the period 2025 to 2040. So how will the first European positive list be generated under task 1? The first list will be based on entries originating from existing national positive lists and other national provisions. In addition, the organic materials positive list will incorporate the plastic food contact materials list of Regulation 10 of 2011. Member States had been given 6 months to notify their lists to ECHA, and this has been achieved. It must be noted, however, that only a minority of Member States have in place national positive lists. Our next step is to process the information submitted by Member States and combine these national submissions into a single positive list for each material category. Then, as far as possible, we aim to review the extent to which the notified lists represent the EU market as a whole. Afterwards, we will assign expiry dates to the entries on the list, and we're currently developing methodologies for doing that. Expiry dates will aim to ensure that the most hazardous entries are reviewed earlier, but also that the application system has the capacity to handle the expected volumes of applications over the 15 years of the review program. The final step will be for the European Commission to adopt the first European positive list into legal text. The Commission is supported by a Member State expert group, which helps with the implementation of the directive as a whole. Within that expert group, an internal working group of Member States has been created to support ECHA in delivering the task assigned to us under Article 11. This slide provides an early look into how long the first positive list might be. For organic materials, we can identify three key sources. The European Plastic Food Contact Materials list with approximately 900 entries. The core and the combined list of the 4MS initiative with another 300 entries approximately. For those not familiar with this initiative, it comprises Germany, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark alongside the UK. These member states have been collaborating since 2011 in developing methodologies for accepting substances into positive lists for the purposes of their national legislations. We will take their work into account. Finally, for organics, other member states have notified numerous other relevant substances. The exact number is uncertain. Right now, we can disclose that it is higher than 100 just to give you an order of magnitude. For the metals and alloys positive list, two are the key sources. The positive list of the 4MSI initiative, with approximately 50 alloys, and a number of additional alloys notified to ECHA by other member states. Their number is higher than 10. For cementitious substances and constituents, similarly, two key sources are relevant. The positive list generated by the 4MSI initiative, with approximately 200 entries, and a number of additional entries notified to ECHA by other member states. Their number is higher than 100. Finally, the last list, for enamels, ceramics, and other inorganic materials, this seems to be the shortest. It brings together around 10 compositions from the 4MSI positive list and a similar number notified by other member states. Now, regarding task 2, while the European positive lists are being put together, ECHA is undertaking a significant volume of scientific work aimed at the development of the backbone of the application system under the directive. This comprises First, setting out the information requirements that need to be met by applications and proposals that will be submitted to ECHA from January 2025 onwards. These information requirements will cover substance and composition identity, hazard information, and importantly, data on migration into the drinking water. We are also documenting relevant risk assessment methods, which will be presented in guidance documents. On the other hand, a new application procedure will need to be built, will need to be documented and then adopted into legal text. This will capture the requirements for the submission of applications and proposals to ECHA. Please note those two terms. Application is a term we use to refer to a dossier submitted to ECHA by industry, while a proposal is to be submitted by an authority. Beyond the submission stage, we are currently developing the procedure through which ECHA's Committee for Risk Assessment, the RAC, will develop an opinion on each valid dossier submitted to ECHA. Finally, as the application procedure will be fully IT supported, the IT systems required for this are also in preparation. Applications and proposals will use the Euclid format, which many of you are likely to be familiar with already. Our aim is to be ready by January 2024, so that applicants and authorities will have sufficient time to familiarize themselves with the new system and the new requirements before everything goes live in 2025. And finally, task 3, the maintenance of the European positive list. This slide tries to give a high-level concept of our approach, and I must be clear that there are many details that have not been decided and many changes are likely to happen between now and the adoption of the system. So please take this as an early indication of what the application process might look like. So at the top of the scheme, you can see some key actors. On the left-hand side, industry. On the right-hand side, we have member states. Industry may apply to ECHA, submitting an application to ECHA to either add a new entry into one of the European positive lists, or more frequently we expect to submit a review application to retain an existing entry into its European positive list. On the other hand, member states may submit a proposal to ECHA, for instance, to add a new entry into one of the European positive lists, or perhaps to update an entry because some new information has come to light, or maybe to remove an entry because of its hazard. In either case, applications and proposals will be subject to technical and content checks by ECHA to ensure that data requirements have been met, the correct format and templates have been used, and generally the information that has been submitted to ECHA is usable. After those checks, the applications or proposals will be subject to a period of consultation of interested parties. So the information presented in applications and proposals, together with anything useful that comes from the consultation phase, will be forwarded to the Committee for Risk Assessment, the RAC, by which an opinion will be generated. The opinion of the RAC will be forwarded to the European Commission, and finally it will be a decision by the Commission whether to accept or reject the application or proposal, leading to an update of the relevant European positive list. As shown also on the left-hand side of the slide, we envisage a self-maintained mechanism to be embedded into the process. By this, I mean that if an expiry date for a substance on one of the lists comes, but nobody has submitted an application to support the substance, to review the substance, then the substance will be removed from the list. I hope this slide gives you some initial ideas, and I will repeat again that there is plenty to be decided upon and changes are likely to happen between now and the adoption of the procedure. So as we're reaching the end of this presentation, let's take a look into the future. As a result of the adoption of the European positive list into legal text in early 2025, new obligations will arise for economic operators in the EU supply chain for materials coming into contact with drinking water. With the term economic operator, we refer to a manufacturer, an importer, a distributor, or a professional user of starting substances, compositions, or constituents, or even materials or final products, or even an only representative of a company based outside the EU. It should be remembered that once a substance is added to one of the European positive lists, its use in the manufacture of contact materials will be possible for all relevant economic actors. So January 2025 is an important milestone. Before that, relevant national legislation and other national provisions will remain in force, and where there are existing national positive lists, these will be subject to maintenance, which means maybe new substances will be added or existing substances will be updated. Similarly, the EU food contact materials legislation will remain in force with the normal maintenance of the EU plastic materials positive list. It is important to note, however, that the EU legislation on food contact materials will be subject to revision in coming years. The details on the direction such changes may take are yet unknown. After the adoption of the European positive list, this new list will play a central role as they will show which substances, compositions or constituents will be allowed for use. Where industry has an interest in using a new substance, that substance will need to be applied for a ECHA. But also, very importantly, all substances listed will need to be periodically reviewed by submitting review applications to ECHA before their expiry dates. Finally, for applications that have been submitted to ECHA, the Committee for Risk Assessment may request additional information in order to develop its opinion. The applicant will be obliged to supply this. So to summarize, here are 4 take-home messages on what lies ahead for the revised Drinking Water Directive. For starting, substances, compositions and constituents of drinking water contact materials, new obligations will arise from January 2025. These new obligations will be defined by information requirements and risk assessment methods which are currently in preparation. To deliver this, ECHA is working closely with DG Environment of the European Commission, the Joint Research Centre, Member States, but also DG Sante and the European Food Safety Authority to ensure proper links to the food contact materials legislation. This preparatory work will take into consideration past work in all relevant fields, including REACH, biocides, the food contact materials legislation, and of course the work of the 4MSI initiative. In parallel, a new application system to support a new application process is in preparation. Applications will be made in the Euclid format, which should be familiar to those who have previously interacted with ECHA in the context of the REACH regulation. Finally, existing national positive lists have already been communicated to ECHA by the member states. This national list will be the basis for creating the first European positive list for contact materials for drinking water. The entries on this list will be prioritized with expiry dates that will be systematically assigned using a methodology that ECHA is currently developing. Finally, although I will not go through the next slide, I encourage you all to take a look at the list of useful resources and contact details that are provided in it. I hope you have found this presentation useful and informative. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to any questions you may have. Hello, I hope you can hear as well. Thank you for your attention to this presentation. My name is, for those perhaps who missed the very beginning of the presentation, is Panagiotis Zarogiannis, and I'm here at the ECHA's building together with my colleague Vesela Viceva, and also remotely joined by another colleague, Stefano Frattini, and we will be glad to take any questions. We have, before we move on, to mention again that the session is being recorded, and the recording and the questions and answers will be made available later. So if you miss something, there is also a possibility to catch up elsewhere. We have added a poll, which I would like to invite everyone who has not taken part to cast a vote, and we have a few questions on the Q&A tab, which we'll try to go through and to try to give some answers where we can, because it's very early stages setting up this new system for the Drinking Water Directive. So if I can go through the list of questions that have been asked. There was a question by Alexander Molter. Good afternoon to you. Wherever you are, maybe it's good morning. The question is, will the whole process be aligned with current regulations and lists already set in place with the 4MSI initiative? To be clear, we are in close collaboration with member states. Of course, we had the notification of the national positive list that I have explained in the presentation, and we are very familiar with the work that the 4MSI has done, and we will certainly take this into account in setting up the new system for the Drinking Water Directive. I also mentioned in the presentation that there is a working group of member states that has been set up to support ECHA in delivering our tasks.
And in that respect, it is worth mentioning that members of the 4MSI are involved in this working group, so we make best use of their expertise and knowledge in this field. When it comes to the lists and migration limits, clearly these have been notified to us. As I mentioned earlier, there was a deadline of the 12th of July, and this has taken place. So all in all, we certainly will take into account what the 4MSI has achieved so far and try to build upon it. And where we see we need to expand beyond that, we will do in collaboration, obviously, with member states and the Commission, who at the end of the day will have to adopt the new requirements into legal text. So thank you for this question. We can move to the next one from Xenia Trier. The question is whether the list will take into account everything that comes from the food contact materials list in Regulation 10 of 2011. Indeed, as required by the legal text of the directive, the organics positive list needs to incorporate what comes from the plastics list from Regulation 10 of 2011. The issue of SVHs is a well pointed out issue that we're familiar with, and we are developing an approach to deal with these substances. I cannot be very specific at this point, but clearly that's something that we need to take into account. And there will be clearly more information to be communicated once we have something more concrete. Thank you for this. I will. I hope I'm not moving too fast because there is another session starting in 8 minutes, so we need to be very strict with the time we allocate. I think I must have captured on Michela Vueric's question whether we're going to replicate any work that comes from the food contact materials. We try to make the system as efficient as possible. Information that comes that is in the forms of assessments from other fora, especially the work that EFSA has done in the past, particularly in recent years, will certainly be taken into account. We will strive to make the system such that duplication is avoided to the extent possible, but we must be clear that we are setting up a system for drinking water. It's not for food contact materials anymore, and the particularities of drinking water versus food materials need to be taken into account. And in that respect, what comes from previous lists that had the focus on food contact materials need to be seen into the context of the new situation for the drinking water. Let me see if we have any additional questions. Where to consult the links, notably the positive list, Pierre is asking. The positive lists have not been published. What we are doing right now, as explained in the presentation, we have received the positive list from the member states. We have compiled them together into single list for organics, metallics, and so forth. And we are trying to clean them up, to put it in layperson's terminology, to make sure that there are no duplicates, that things sit together very well. And we need obviously to consult with them, with member states and the Commission. So at some point they will be made available, but they are currently not available. If the question is whether they have been published somewhere, this is not yet the case. I'm trying on the fly to read any questions. Vesely, is there any question you would like to take?
I can answer Steve Hollins' question. If substances that would be used to treat drinking water fall into the directive, no, the directive includes substances that are used to manufacture materials that would come in contact with drinking water. So this is the answer of this question.
Thank you, Vesela. There is a question, they're moving as well on the screen, so it's a little bit difficult to catch up. Amaya is asking whether the positive list is limited to plastics in contact with drinking water, or is planned to cover other type of materials that then lixiviate to water environments. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but the focus of Article 11 is to address new materials used in reconstruction starting from abstraction all the way to the tap, not beyond the tap. And I don't, if I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I think what you are describing is probably outside the scope of what I have referred to. The PFAS question. Ask about, Cynthia is asking that other participants ask about PFAS and that are mobile and toxic. What about those that are not toxic or mobile? The PFAS is also addressed within the Drinking Water Directive in other parts of it, and we certainly going to take latest information and other activities with regard to PFAS when we set up the European positive list. We don't have a clear answer to this right now, but we will take current knowledge into account. I hope I am not missing any question in my haste to address as many as possible. I see Xenia's question, will the legislation consider the drinking water materials recyclability in a circular economy, including use of multi-layer multi-materials and how chemicals degradation products may affect it? I'm trying to think clearly on my feet right now whether the recyclability is something that will be taken into account. My initial and very tentative answer will be that the information requirements we have been putting together in terms of substance identity, hazard, migration, do not necessarily capture recyclability. But please, for a more considered response, I would suggest that you use the contact function we have to provide something much more detailed to this question rather than the very quick answer I can offer to you right now. An anonymous question, will the expiry dates vary substance by substance? Yes, the quick answer is yes. And there is requirements in the Drinking Water Directive legal text where we need to take into account hazard, availability of risk assessments, and how up-to-date the risk assessments are in assigning expiry dates. So indeed, more hazardous substances will come earlier in the review program. They will be assessed earlier than others that are more benign, and we can wait a little bit further with those. I see a new one from Monday. Will the new information requirements on hazard assessment be part of the one substance one assessment strategy previously discussed, or will some tests need to be performed twice? That's a very good and very open-ended question, and I don't think we have enough time even to scratch the surface. A principle we try to obey is that we need to minimize duplication. We need to indeed to strive to achieve this one substance one assessment, and for that reason, what assessments have been done previously on the substances that will go into the positive list need to be taken into consideration. I cannot be more specific than that. Obviously, the system is being set up as we speak. The process and the application requirements and the information requirements are going to be decided, and we will certainly take this very, very seriously into account. I think we have very little time left before the next session starts, so I'm afraid we will not be able to take more questions. Thank you for your interest. We can try to provide some answers in writing. So if somebody wishes to stay in this session or come back later on, we can do something. More generally, for the more complex ones, you can always try to get in touch with us through our help desk. And with thanks for your attention, I will try to switch off and pass you on to the next presentation, which is on SCIP. Thank you very much.